Hey, friends, welcome to the Career Refresh Podcast. I'm your host, Jill Griffin. Listen, I didn't use any music. Did you notice? I feel like everyone, including myself, skips through the intro, so I'm trying this podcast without it. You can let me know your thoughts at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com, but do you also skip through intros? Let me know. All right, this week, friends, as we kick off 2023, I have invited my friend and fellow entrepreneur, Rebecca Gebhardt, to the show. Rebecca and I met at a mastermind about a year ago, and we became fast friends. Similar sense of humor, both really have love to laugh, love to dig in, super strategic. And, when you work for yourself, sometimes it's hard to not have colleagues. So making sure that I have a tight, beautiful, strategic network has been really crucial to my continued success. And if you're an employee, you're doing the same thing by having your own mental board of directors, like who is on your team. It's the same thing. So Rebecca Gebhardt is a best-selling author of Beyond the Board, How to Achieve Your Vision Board Goals in a Fulfilling and Sustainable Way, which I'd also put the link to that in the show notes because this is vision board season, right? Whether it's first quarter or each quarter as you're thinking about it, this is a way, her book is a way of thinking about vision board goals in a fulfilling and sustaining way so you don't get burned out. She specializes in guiding emerging sales leaders through the transition from the sales leaderboard to leadership. She also helps corporate sales leadership teams strengthen their leadership pipelines. Isn't that what all of us have been talking about over the last few years, about finding the pipeline and finding the right talent for our organizations? This is what Rebecca does. She is a corporate sales trainer who has created so much success. She has over 20 years experience and has led teams that have generated over 50 million in revenue. Dig into this conversation as Rebecca and I talk about burnout, how knowing your strengths is the path to success, how you can't skip steps. You can accelerate steps with the help of a coach or a guide or a mentor, but you can't skip them. The only way to it is through it. And lastly, we talk about building your own identity and how you want to identify as a leader. I'm going to put all the links to find her information in the show notes. And as always, I will see you on the other side. Hey, Rebecca, I'm so excited that you're here with me today.
Good morning, Jill. I'm excited to be here.
All right. I always love to take people back and start from the beginning. So take us back to the early years and tell us, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
Oh, I always wanted to be a teacher.
Oh.
My parents are retired teachers. My mom taught science. My dad was a guidance counselor. And me and my girlfriends would play school every single day.
I love it.
That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a teacher. So I'm a corporate teacher.
Well, I was going to say, I can see, and as our listeners will learn through our conversation, I can see the threads of that in the work you do today. So that's really neat. So then take us through a high level. You wanted to be a teacher. You went to university. Take us through a high level of your career and where you are today.
Yeah, so I was the child who, I know I said I wanted to be a teacher as a kid, but I never really knew what I wanted to do or be. And I felt a ton of pressure, even in college, choosing a major. And I chose my major of human resources. I was in the business school, but it was really strange. I mean, I was high school valedictorian, and then I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And it's funny that I found it again as a corporate kind of teacher of what I'm doing now with consulting work. But I chose my major, I think, late junior year. I'm surprised I got out in 4 years. Then I went into insurance, which is strictly sales, not human resources at all. But I did that because I was looking at top HR starting salaries, and when I graduated from Marquette University, I think at that time it was like $40,000 was the average starting salary. And I made that in 3 months in sales. So I'm just going to keep sales. I didn't want to do it. It was strictly about lifestyle and money, which I don't know if that's good or bad. That's just what I chose. And so then I got into sales leadership. We'll probably talk about a little bit more. I burnt out in that business, took a pause for about 4 years, reevaluated, all that stuff. And then I launched my own consulting firm a little over 4 years ago. And that's what I've been doing since, where we specialize in helping corporate sales leadership teams get leveled up and on the same page, and then strengthen corporate leadership pipelines.
Okay, we're definitely going to dig into that, but I do want to go back to what you mentioned about burnout. So, do you mind talking about what happened?
Yes, I am not a quitter. I was raised to not be a quitter, and I think all high performers don't quit. And we accept, you have to accept that there's going to be pain in life. You don't have to deal. I despise the word grind it out, rise and grind. Grind is dull, meaningless work. I absolutely am appalled when people say that. But you have to accept there's going to be some amount of pain to get to success. That's what perseverance and grit is. But I did that for so long. I tried to be like other salespeople. I tried to be like other sales leaders. I had no idea, and I know you are a strength-based person. I had no idea what my strengths were outside of working really hard. I didn't know. I didn't know, and I didn't know any better to find out. So I just put my head down and I went to work, and I was recognized among my peers as a top sales professional and a top 1% team leader. And then I just hit this point where I go, what else is there? I'd reached the top. I went, nothing, but how do I quit? Like, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And it's funny because I actually coach people at my old insurance company, and I share this lesson with them of like, you can have a very successful career. You just have to do it in a way that's aligned with you and what you really want. And I didn't do that. So I burnt out of boredom. I burnt out working 70 to 80-hour weeks. I just burnt out. And I got to walk away looking good, though, because I was pregnant with our second child. So I got to say, I'm going to be a mom now.
Okay.
I got to leave gracefully. I really used the mom excuse, and it wasn't an excuse. It actually was like timing,
divine timing, like kind of worked out.
Yeah. Yes. It gave me a really great reason to leave. And then in those 4 years, I was a terrible stay-at-home mom. I mean, I just was bored out of my mind. And I have really good friends that are stay-at-home moms. It just wasn't for me. But I did get 4 years with my children, and I am very grateful for that. And then, and I did more self-development in those 4 years, at more reading, more introspective work than I had done because I was too busy working to do it.
So you said you burnt out, and you said that you were overworking, and that you were, I believe you said you were tired. Were there other signs? Like, I'm just thinking for anyone listening right now, what are some of the signs between burnout versus, I'm just bored and I don't want to do this job anymore, or I feel empty inside, which can also be a nuance of burnout. But do you have other signs that you could point for others to be aware of?
Yes. So I was always so exhausted, like very exhausted after a week of work. I remember in my late 20s, I was probably 27 years old. I went to the doctor and I said, I think I have thyroid issues because I am so tired. And he goes, I never got my thyroid tested, but he goes, well, tell me about what you're doing. I said, well, I work. I'm in sales. He said, how many hours you work? And I said, 60 to 70. And he goes, that's probably your problem. You're working too hard. To which I went, everybody I work with works that much. Like, I've always worked as, and like, you think going to the doctor, and then it turned out I shouldn't eat gluten. So it was like, some of the foods I was eating was causing severe, but that was good too. And the other thing is when I used to get recognized, and every a salesperson knows what it feels like to walk across the stage and to get the awards and to get the statues. And it didn't mean anything anymore to me. And I knew that was off. I wasn't feeling joyful in the process. And it became instead of working towards more success, I was trying to hang on to what I had. It was like, trying to keep my power and my influence, and it was more about keeping versus
Yeah.
expanding. And so those were kind of, I didn't see
Sure,
that at
sure.
the
But I think
time,
it's
but I see
helpful
that
for
now.
you to articulate that for others. I mean, there's a book called Burnout. It's by their sisters, Emily Nagoski. She's a PhD, and then her sister is a master's, Amelia Nagoski. And they say that it's a mixture of emotional exhaustion. There's a decreased sense of accomplishment, which you talking about those awards and just kind of being like, ugh. And then the other nuance, which I think is really important to notice, is what they call depersonalization. And it's like this level of depletion of empathy, depletion of like, you just don't care. Like, you just like, whatever. And then there's this just like, it feeds itself, right? So you stop caring about the things that you're doing. You stop caring about, your peers' accomplishments or what's going on. And then there's also like this feeling of fertility. And you just kind of feel like, well, nothing changes. And I want to always point that out because everybody comes to burnout and exhaustion through different ways. So I appreciate you sharing how for you, you had two of those major ways, at least according to these two authors and researchers, how they classify it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting.
It's burnout, the secret of unlocking the stress cycle. And then also, as you were sharing about, meeting the doctor, I mean, I think I had a very similar experience with burnout myself. And I remember doctor sitting with me, and he was a functional medicine doctor, but he was also an acupuncturist, and he was checking my pulse. And he asked me if I wanted to go out and like take medical leave because of how exhausted I was. And then I remember him saying to me, Jill, adrenals are for running away from burning buildings. They're not for building websites. So maybe you could rethink that. And at the time I was working with major global media companies, and, pushing out a website a month was like no small feat, but something we did regularly. We just kept pushing ourselves to that level of grind. So from there, you took the time off, you spent time with your children, you said you weren't good at it. What was more challenging than you thought?
I'm getting better. So I want to actually choose. It's not that I'm improving, but I was not good at being present and just kind of like sitting, and I'm not a patient.
Yeah. So you created your own reality is what you're saying.
I always have to have a bunch of things going on. And what I feel like this whole conversation around, is it corporate America's fault? I have been self-employed my entire life. When I was a 1099. I have never, you create your own reality. It's not corporate America's fault. People are going to leave their jobs, and you should go explore things. But then you find out, oh, it's me. Like, there is personal responsibility and there is corporate responsibility. That's what I do with sales leaders, of like, how can you lead these people to go all in without burning out? That you have to educate, and then the person has to take on responsibility. But I wasn't good with, like, sitting and doing nothing. So like when my son was, when they're just babies, they just sit there. And I remember I was like, what do I do all day with this baby? Like, I didn't know what to do. And then the other hard thing, and I don't know how to even say this the nice way, but the stay-at-home moms I was hanging out with, we didn't talk about significant things. And significance is one of my strengths finders. It's one of my top ones. So I have a hard time with small talk. It's actually one of my weaknesses. I'm awkward at it. I'm an introvert, and people go, you're not. Yeah, I am. I will talk about meaningful conversation all day long. But if we're going to talk, about the diaper rash, or like, my husband's, I couldn't do it. And I tried again to fit in the mold and make it work. And I didn't do it. But I also didn't know what's my next thing. I didn't know what my next option was going to be and what I would do when I returned to work. But that was a big part.
Wait, so your number one strength is significance. Tell me your top 5, if you recall them.
I do, but I don't. So, relator is my first one.
Okay.
Significance is number 2. Focus, activator, and strategic.
Aha. I love it. I love it. Yeah. I can see all of that in you. And I love strength work. My number one strength is futuristic. My number two is strategic. So we have a lot of
Nice.
that type of focus and strategic going on there. So you spent the time. How did you decide to I love what you do. I love that you support sellers. You support sales leadership, leveraging their talents, leveraging their strengths. I mean, this is something that is so needed. And yet I don't find a lot of people offering this service. So how did that come about?
I'm an Enneagram 4. So we talk about strengths. So with a 3 wing, so if anyone's listening, I am an individualist with an achiever wing. And I look at things in unique ways. But what happened, and I'm actually getting ready to do a keynote at a national sales meeting, and it's called Strength-Based Goal Setting for a Competitive Edge, which is sort of based off of my book, Beyond the Board, about achieving vision board goals and the strength-based aspect that I've really gotten into the last couple of years. But one of the things I'm mentioning in that speech that I'll mention right now is, and it was in some book, I don't remember what it was, but they said, interview people and ask them what you're good at. So that's what I did. I called several of my former managers and directors, my old coworkers. I asked my husband, I asked a couple of my best friends. I'm like, what do you think my greatest strengths are? And it was funny because I did it myself first. I went, here's what I'm good at. I mean, I didn't take a strength finder. I didn't actually really know about assessments 5 years ago. And some of the things that I put down was never mentioned. And I went, okay, a little ego check here, Rebecca. And then, but some of the things that they said were aligned. And I went, I could go into coaching with this. And so that's what I did. So I had been a sales leader. I'd been coaching salespeople for 20 years, well, not that, maybe 17 years at that point. I went, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a coaching business. I coach people one-on-one. Well, I went in with it. I'm like, I'm going to coach female entrepreneurs who are starting businesses. And it didn't take me long to realize that that's a great place to be. But I was like, no one has money. Do you know what I mean? Like it was like women entrepreneurs with side gigs. And I went, this isn't going to be feasible. Then I went all in with salespeople. And then right before COVID, it was in 2019. I had a huge influx of new sales leader clients who were referred from old coworkers of mine. And they all had the same problem. And I went, wait a minute, why is no one coaching new sales leaders? Right? There's executive coaching, there's sales coaching. And then I did, and it was a stat, and it was in Everyone Deserves a Great Manager. It was a Harvard Business Review stat that says that the average age someone gets their first leadership promotion is age 30, and their first leadership training is at age 42.
So 12 years, you're on your own, kids.
Trial and error, grind it out. And I went, holy cow. And I realized that 80% of sales leaders are not trained at all. And I went, I'm like, is this really stupid? Or is this a good idea? Like,
or genius.
Yeah, genius. So I went all in with it. And that's where I love to play because it's unique. And I can bring my strategic strengths of setting up programs backed by data that get results. And so that may be a longer answer than you wanted, but it was just like a progression. And I went, here's what I think my job, I think it's female entrepreneurs. I think it's salespeople. And then it goes, nope, that's not it for you. That's not how you can impact people the most. And so it's really been a very fun journey. And I know that this is the space I'm playing in for a really long time. It's just really fun. It's really
so fun. I just want to pause on that too. Okay. So for anyone listening, finding the time, again, for Rebecca, it was due to maternity leave and raising her children. But for others, finding the time to pause and start doing some of that inner work. Whether you're reading books, whether you're taking a course, whether you're working with a coach, whether you do it through lots of different means, really finding the way to do that inner work to get to know yourself better when you're not running around trying to achieve at a level that you can't think. Even just, we're recording this in early January and coming off the holiday break. I mean, I can't even tell you how many pages of notebooks I filled because I wasn't working and churning to the same level every single day. There was like space to just be and like take a walk and enjoy, So finding that time is really, really key. I love also, as you know, you and I are both strengths people, but I love that you did it in the intuitive, natural way, which is starting to think for yourself. What am I good at? When am I in the flow? When does time just pass that I don't even think about it? And then checking yourself and asking other people. And yes, for anyone listening, you can get, it's $50. You can go to Gallup. You can get the strength assessment. It's an excellent assessment. You can read it yourself. You can work with a coach. That's the work that I do. But getting that information and really knowing yourself on another level starts to help you see where you want to lean in. And I think that's one of the most important things too, is that strengths don't tell you what you should do. Strengths are going to tell you how you're going to show up once you choose what you do. So whether you work in healthcare, finance, or you're a corporate sales trainer, you're going to show up as a relator. You're going to show up with significance. You're going to show up with focus and achieving and strategic. That's who you are. So I think that that's a really important way of just like, as we're starting the new year, really thinking, finding ways to find that time. So fast forwarding then, you were working with individuals, but now you go into major organizations and teach at scale. That I think is so genius. Take us through what you did there.
Well, I hired a good coach.
Funny how that works.
Yeah. No, I remember in college at when I was new to sales, we'd spend a week in sales school, and the company was based in Nashville. We'd be there for a week. And there was a woman who'd get on stage, and every year she had the same training thing. And she talked about how she used to be a corporate trainer. And I went, I don't know what the heck that is, but I want to be that. And that was always in the back of my head. I was like, doesn't that sound sexy? A corporate trainer? And I'm from a small farm town of 1,200 people. There were no corporations. There's no stoplights, so corporation sounded really good. And when I look at maximizing strengths, maximizing the value per hour we work, not just for my value, but my impact on other people, like other people's value. I just went, I've got to go from one-on-one to working with these teams. And I have given presentation. I have done trainings before in front of groups of people and at national sales meetings. I just didn't do it for a living. So I hired a great coach. I learned the ins and outs. And my very first client, corporate client, was actually an old friend of mine. This is the national sales meeting I'm speaking at. I worked with them for a couple of years, and it was awkward. So anyone, and I'm sharing this because no one shares the initial. They just go, look how successful I am now.
Show us the messy omelet. Show us how the egg has become an omelet.
It's ugly. And, but I spoke to them. I said, we're going to get all the sales leaders on the same page. It's what I do with individuals, but it doesn't cost as much, right? Because it's not one-on-one, it's group. And he goes, Campana, which is my maiden name. He calls me by my maiden name. He goes, are we your first corporate client? And I said, yes. And I'll never have to answer yes again. Thank you. It was so awkward, because you have to fake it till you make it, but you can't. If they literally ask you,
because it's your integrity, you can't lie.
Yeah. I'm like, how many other organizations you work with? None. But
you had proof of concept and working with individuals.
Yes, I had. Yes. And that's the important thing as we go to scale, and you can't skip steps. You can move through them quicker than other people, but you can't skip steps. And you just have to be willing to go, okay, here's where I'm at right now. This is what I'm getting paid. This is the size of the team I work with. And then you make it a goal to get a little bit better, And you can have exponential growth if you have the right people around you. So, but just be okay. And I remember I have a consultant friend of mine, and we were talking, and I went, I only made $60,000 this year. And she said, that took me 4 years to make $60,000, and then you start making six figures. Like, I'm only made six figures and someone else is making 7. They go, listen, it takes time. right? If you want to have sustainable success, you can go from 0 to 1 million, but
Yep.
is that sustainable? Are you going to be able to do
And
it
do you
again?
want to sustain it, right? Meaning, obviously, many people want the sustained results of the million, but what it took you to get there is that, do you want to sustain it in the same way? And, I always say, in order to scale your business or your project, or if you're an employee, to scale your purview of what you're doing, we have to scale your brain. And I love that you said that you can't skip steps. You may accelerate through them faster, but you can't skip steps. And I think that that's the most important part of failure, where, you can look at failure in lots of different ways. And sometimes there's failure where money is lost and things get broken and it's really messy. But there's also failure that's like, all right, well, that didn't work. They didn't buy that deal. They didn't buy that offer. I didn't sign that client. It doesn't mean that it's a public caning. It's more of looking at it like, okay, so what could I tweak? What could I do differently? How can I go back to that conversation and see what else I could hear? I love that, Rebecca. That is really, really profound. Really, really profound. So how do you continue to tap into your instinct?
I think pausing. So you said you got to take some, so I say you got to slow down if you want to speed up. And I do believe in that, but I also don't, if I overthink things, then I get into trouble, for me personally. Okay. So I think it's important to pause. But I'll tap in. Well, I think acknowledging my own strengths, and this is what I help people with too. Once you get an assessment, so you do Strengths Finder by Gallup. I'm Colby certified, which is about how they're different strengths, and I think it's great to get a bunch of assessments. But
I'm a quick start.
Oh my gosh, you totally are. Yeah, I'm a 6 in quick start. You're probably a 9. Totally, I know.
And anyone listening, that's Colby. It's Kolbe. It's a great assessment also to look at how you work. It's also best done in teams, which Rebecca could help you with as she comes into your team.
Yeah, it's that's so funny. But I think getting validation or proof for me is important. And I went, oh, I guess I really am real strategic. Like strategic is, but I'm also in Colby, I'm a follow through. I create systems as well. It's actually how I go about designing things. Where you might start experimenting with a ton of ideas, which is why journaling for you should be doing that. We should all be journaling, but it's, then I went, okay, because I don't know if it's with women or high achievers. We go, well, I'm not as good as them. That might not be a strength of mine. It's like, no, it's a strength of yours. Now you need it. I'm sorry. It's a talent. You need to develop it into a strength. If you don't use it, it doesn't help you. It's not a strength. It's just there.
But muscle has memory. You use it, it gets stronger.
So that's what I do. And I encourage people to do is just forget about comparing yourself to everyone else. Like what do you see in yourself? What do assessments say about you? And just start gathering proof and then identify as that person. Identify is something I was talking with a sales leader on this Lessons from the Leaderboard to Leadership series I do on LinkedIn. And he said the hardest thing from a salesperson to a sales leader is identifying as a leader. And he said it, and then I heard it from someone else. And I have been obsessed, Jill, lately about how do we identify with like ourselves? Do I identify? Because you can say, oh, yeah, I have that strength, or they told me I'm good at this. But if you don't identify as that, nothing's going to come from it. You have to internalize it.
I love that you said that, because I take the idea that personality isn't permanent, and you can take an assessment that will tell you something. But if you don't believe it, if you don't embody it, if you don't do thought work to take a talent and make it a strength, then it's just information or data on paper. It doesn't mean it's going to show up. So that idea of taking your talents, leaning into them, and also knowing, like, if you don't work on believing it, it's not going to show up in your results.
Is belief one of your top Clifton strengths?
It's not a top. Okay. It's not a top strength of mine. I think it comes through with my futuristic of like really looking towards. I can see what you can't see. I can see around the corner. Really having that innate understanding. I mean, and it paid off very well when I worked in corporate marketing, because it was like, no, this is where I understand the consumer sentiment, the marketplace trends, the velocity of business. That's where we need to go. And understanding that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So I don't know when this podcast will be, but again, it's January 2nd. We're recording this. And yes. When I really, just going back to this, I hope people will, instead, if you've chosen a word of the year, that's fine. But what I think is more important is, who are you identifying as this year? Because who you identify as is you will work within that. If you don't see yourself as a person who can achieve your first 6-figure year, you're not going to do it. You're going to go through the motions and you're going to do the work and you're going to think it, but you actually don't identify, you don't believe it. So it won't happen.
What do you do to keep your career fresh? Tell everyone how you keep it real and keep yourself motivated.
Well, there's 3 things. So one is perspective. So choosing to view your career in a new light. You don't necessarily need to change your career. Some people need to, but I think looking at it in a new light is really good. The second thing is, of course, aligning strengths to their work. So taking time to figure out what their strengths are. And then the third thing is, be confident in yourself. We build confidence when we're using our strengths and we're doing things right. So catch yourself doing things right and you build your confidence. But you do need to keep your own checklist of, that was good work. Good job. You got one. You got a win today. That's really important, because that confidence will follow you as you choose to get a promotion or change your line of work. But you'll have confidence going into that.
So what do you have coming down, in the next couple of weeks, months? Tell them, how can they work with you?
I have one public Leaderboard to Leadership accelerator that runs every year. And this is the 4th year. And it starts January 25th. And we are taking applications. And I'm sure you'll put the link where people can find that. It is for aspiring sales leaders, emerging sales leaders, and new sales leaders. And it's a 10-week course. It's an on-demand mixed with live group coaching, and everyone gets one-on-one coaching. We do some strength work, but it's really geared to, how do you build the mindset, the skill sets, and the competence? Like, what does it really take? What does the data say that make really great sales leaders? And then how do you work within that? So I've created a playbook that leaders can use to create a competitive advantage for themselves as they interview. Can you imagine interviewing for your first sales leadership role and be like, I'm already certified in frontline sales leadership? Like that's, or I have a program, I have a duplicatable system the sales team can use. So that's what's happening. And then I also run on LinkedIn. People can connect with me. I live on there. These lessons from the Leaderboard to Leadership, where I interview top sales leaders about their experience. And those I do bi-weekly.
Okay, I'm going to put all of Rebecca's links in the show notes so you can take advantage of this Leaderboard to Leadership program and start this year with excellence in sales leadership and really understanding how to leverage your innate strengths and talents to really create the results that you want throughout this year, and also be talking to people who understand sales if you are a sales leader. All right, my final question for you, Rebecca, is there a podcast or a book or something you are reading right now that you would love to share with our audience, something that's inspiring you or keeping you curious that would be helpful for people listening?
Well, yeah, there's 2 of them. There's one that Colby Corp actually runs, and which, if you look for Colby, Kolbe, it's amazing. But the other one that I love to listen to is by Michael Hyatt, and it's called Business Accelerator. Him and his daughter do it, and Michael's out of Nashville, Tennessee. It's so phenomenal. I go back and listen to so much of it. I refer it to my clients. It's really great background. So if people are building businesses and they're scaling, it's another great resource.
I think it's the perfect place to end. Rebecca, thank you so much for being here and sharing with everyone. I'm going to put the links to the podcast that you're listening to that you recommended, in addition to your program that's coming up, in the show notes, and everyone can check you out there. Thanks so much.